Hello, everyone. Welcome to another life group. Great to have you all gathered together again. As I'm recording this, there are other people in the building, so if you hear some pots or pans banging or people yelling things, I'm sorry. I don't know what to do about it, but I'll try to get them out in post-production editing. So tonight, as you get together, to break the ice a little bit, I would love for you to share with the group how long you have been a Christian. And I say it specifically like that because I think for maybe some, you were part of a church, but you were part of it either because your parents forced you to go or you didn't really understand what was going on. How long would you say you have been a Christian? Share that with your group at this time. All right, the text that we read for the sermon on Sunday was from Luke chapter 18. So I'd encourage you, if you have your Bibles along, to get out to Luke chapter 18. We're going to start at verse 9. And I just want to read through the text and kind of pull out some additional points for us to study. I got some good feedback this week from one of you who's in a life group about the videos and the questions that I ask you, and that they be a little bit more focused on the text. So I appreciated that feedback, so I'm going to try to do that for you tonight. The first verse of the text says, "To some who are confident of their own righteousness and look down on everyone else." So it says that they were confident of their own righteousness. I think there's a way that you can correctly understand every Christian to be confident of their own righteousness, and there's also a wrong way for you to understand confident of their own righteousness. So based on the parable, which you can read if you want to out loud in your group, what is the definition of good confidence in our righteousness, and what is the definition of bad confidence in our righteousness? Take some minutes and discuss that. The definition of confidence in our own righteousness that is bad is a confidence that comes from our behavior, how good we are as people. Are we doing the right things? Are we saying the right things? Do we have the right attitudes? Do we have the right values? And does that make us inherently more valuable to God or to His church? And if that's where our confidence lies, if we feel like I'm important to this church because of fill in the blank with anything that isn't Jesus, then that is confidence in our own righteousness that is unhealthy. However, there is a confidence in our own righteousness that is healthy, and we understand that as God giving His righteousness to us through Christ. Romans 1 is a great place to look for this, the righteousness of God that has been revealed by faith to faith. It's talking about how we have received Christ's righteousness, and now it's not just Christ's righteousness anymore, it's our righteousness. So, if we have a confidence that says, no matter what anyone says, no matter what anyone does, even if the accuser, Satan, comes to me and tells me I am not good enough for God, I have this guarantee that Christ's righteousness is credited to my account, and therefore it is now as good as my righteousness, and no one can take that away from me. As we continue in the text, look at verse 10. The verse says that two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The implication here is that there are both men worshiping, right? So apply that to our congregation. If Jesus says there was a Pharisee who turns out to be sort of the bad guy in this story, and a tax collector who seems to sort of be the good guy in this story, and both of them were worshiping, what does that mean for our church? What does that mean for other churches? And how does that affect how we interact with each other and what we think about each other? Take some moments and discuss that. What we have to understand every time we come into the worship setting is that there are those there who are true believers and those who are not. And this is very clear. Jesus says this in multiple places. He says that on the last day, there will be those who say, Lord, Lord, didn't we drive out demons and prophesy in your name? Like we were doing good Christian-y things. But Jesus says at that point, I'm going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. And Matthew 13, where Jesus tells the parable of the sower, says this as well. There are those who believe, and on the last day, they are not going to be saved because either they throw away their faith, or their faith is choked out by the cares and concerns of this world. So we have to come into church with the understanding that not everyone is a done deal by their faith. Right? Obviously, forgiveness from God comes to every single person universally, objectively, without any questions asked. However, that grace is received through faith, and faith is something you can't see. So, it is important for us to understand as Christians that every person's spiritual well-being is at risk because of the temptations of Satan and because of their own sinful nature. And I think that should lead us to see every person as worth my time to check in with spiritually. Now, that doesn't mean that you personally are going to check in with every single person spiritually, but I think even for those who we would consider to be quote-unquote strong Christians, we still should be talking about spiritual things. I'm a victim of this because I work with our leadership team, and I work with other people who are very involved with our church, who I would say, on the surface at least, look like very strong Christians. And oftentimes I bypass spiritual conversations with them because I kind of get tempted to think they're fine, they're doing good. But if this is true, that the Pharisee and the tax collector go up to the temple to pray, then I can't assume that. I have to assume that we are at war and that every person is in danger. I would love for you, if you didn't already, to discuss the implications of that a little bit further. But if you did already discuss it, let's move on in the text. The text in verse 11 says, "The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, 'God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even this tax collector.'" In the sermon, I made the point about the Pharisee standing by himself, and that self-righteousness separates you from other people, while the gospel unites you with other people. I would love for you first to focus on that phrase, "stood by himself," and see if you can, as a group, put together a list of ways that being self-righteous can separate you from other people. I would love if you could get maybe 2 or 3 or maybe more ways in which self-righteousness separates you from other people. Take some minutes and do that. Self-righteousness can separate us from other people in a number of ways, and I'm sure you thought of a number of them as well. Just one that I want to pull out for you is the idea that if somebody else is not able to act as well as I can act in any one category, so say it's your Christian behavior, it's how you talk to each other, it's the way you raised your kids, the way you give, the way you volunteer, whatever it is, that I don't have a common ground to converse with them. Right? Like they maybe just don't get it, is the way we would talk about it. That is a dangerous place to be, because it's suddenly making our relationship as members of a church based on external things rather than the internal thing that is the Word of God preached and received by faith. The thing that every one of us has in common, whether we're old or young, white or black, whether we're from a Christian background or a non-Christian background, whether we've got our life together or not got our life together, is that we are all receiving grace from God. And that should be the linchpin of all of our relationships. Everything that we have in our relationships as church hinges on that truth. The second part of that verse that we just read is where the Pharisee makes his prayer, his self-righteous prayer. And he says, I'm thankful that I'm not like other men, right? Then he lists all sorts of types of people who he considers to be bad. In the sermon, I listed a number of examples of ways that we can feel self-righteous about other people, how we can essentially echo that prayer, "Thank you, God, that I'm not like so-and-so." I would love for you as a group right now to get transparent and maybe pick one group of people or a type of person, obviously don't name names, but a type of person or a group of people about which you are very often tempted to say, "Thank God I'm not like them." I would love for you to share that with your group right now. Verse 12 of the text is the last part of the Pharisee's prayer. He says, "I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all I get." So self-righteousness isn't just looking down on other people, it's also looking at yourself as valuable for the things that you do. What would be a thing in your life that you would say is equivalent to "I fast twice a day and give, or twice a week and give 10% of all that I have"? Many of you don't fast, I'm sure, and some of you might give 10%, some of you might not. I would love for you to pick out something in your life that motivates you to speak that way or to think that way about yourself. I'll give you mine. I always am tempted to think I know the Bible better than other people. because I study it, because I have a degree in it, it's very easy for me to start to think to myself, God, thank you that I'm not like other people who don't know the Bible as well as I do. And that's my temptation. I would love if you would share yours with your group. The last couple verses of the text here have the tax collector's prayer where he says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And then Jesus' explanation that he says, I tell you, this man rather than the other went home justified before God. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. It's an interesting idea to humble yourself. I remember my dad always making this joke. It's such a dad joke, which means I'll totally do it. But he always likes to say, I'm the humblest person I know. I think it's really hard for us to actually truly humble ourselves, because as soon as we try to humble ourselves, we start to feel a little bit self-righteous or arrogant about how humble we are. So I would love for you to discuss as a group, how do you get humbled? How do you get humbled? Take a couple minutes and discuss that. I believe somebody who is humbled is someone who realizes the ways that life humbles you. I don't think you can proactively seek humility. Humility is something that happens to you and you either choose to accept or choose to deny. For example, that's a dumb example, but let's say you're trying out for a sports team and you don't make the team. That is life humbling you. But you have a couple choices at that point, right? You can say, yep, I'm never going to be that good at whatever, basketball. And so I might play, but I'm not going to think of myself too highly as a basketball player. Or you could think, those people who did the tryouts are so dumb, they don't know me, they don't know my talent, I'm really good at basketball, and so I'm going to keep working at this and keep trying. Now, when it comes to something like sports, maybe that's a good thing to have an extra level of drive, motivation to be better at this sport. But when it comes to your Christian life, there are multiple places in your life where God is going to humble you. He is going to remind you that you are not strong enough to make it on your own, that you are not good enough to pull it off yourself, that you don't have enough resources or intelligence or emotional stability to make it through all the terrible things that happen because of your sin and other people's sin. And so it's your choice at those moments when bad things happen to you or when you cause bad things to happen to say, this is God humbling me, and I'm going to accept his recommendation, his sign, if you will, his communication that I'm not good enough. I'm going to accept that and rest more fully in Jesus. So I would love if we would all move forward in life looking for those opportunities to be humbled. How is this bad thing that's happening in my life, or this thing that's not going my way, how is this serving me to focus more on Jesus? I heard a great sermon this week from a pastor who said, at the end of the day, somebody is always on trial because your days are never perfect. The question is, are you going to put God on trial, or are you going to let yourself be put on trial? In other words, are you at the end of the day going to say, God, why don't you do what I want? Or are you going to say, God, why don't I do what you want? I hope you grew from this study. I'm thankful that you get together and you read the Bible together, and I hope that I will see you on Sunday for the next sermon in our series from the I Undeserved This series. Have a good evening, and I will see you soon.